That moment has now arrived. So today, to revive the hope of peace and a two-state solution.
A seismic shift in world diplomacy, Canada, Britain and Australia recognise Palestine. For Israelis, an existential threat. For Palestinians, long denied legitimacy. As tanks grind through Gaza and Trump digs in, the fault lines of peace and war redraw before our eyes. History was made today. In a coordinated announcement, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Britain's Keir Starmer declared what generations had debated: their country's formal recognition of an independent Palestinian state. In a social media message, Prime Minister Starmer captured the gravity of the moment, citing the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza as the driving force behind the decision.
That moment has now arrived. So today, to revive the hope of peace and a two-state solution, I state clearly, as Prime Minister of this great country, that the United Kingdom formally recognises the State of Palestine. We recognised the State of Israel more than 75 years ago as a homeland for the Jewish people. Today, we join over 150 countries who recognise a Palestinian state also. A pledge to the Palestinian and Israeli people that there can be a better future. I know the strength of feeling that this conflict provokes.
In an official statement, Australian PM Albanese said,
Australia's recognition of Palestine today, alongside Canada and the United Kingdom, is part of a coordinated international effort to build new momentum for a two-state solution, starting with a ceasefire in Gaza and the release of the hostages taken in the atrocities of October 7, 2023. Today's act of recognition reflects Australia's long-standing commitment to a two-state solution, which has always been the only path to enduring peace and security for the Israeli and Palestinian peoples.
Mark Carney also echoed those sentiments.
It is in this context that Canada recognizes the State of Palestine and offers our partnership in building the promise of a peaceful future for both the State of Palestine and the State of Israel. Canada does so as part of a coordinated international effort to preserve the possibility of a two-state solution.
Portugal also announced it too would recognise Palestine ahead of the UN General Assembly in New York. But even as world leaders prepared to gather, events on the ground in Gaza told a darker story. Israeli tanks and troops pressed deeper into Gaza City. Thousands fled the fighting. The Health Ministry in Gaza reported more than 65,000 Palestinians killed since the war erupted, a conflict that began with Hamas's October 7th attack nearly 2 years ago, which killed 1,200 Israelis and 251 taken hostage. Responding to the recognition of the Palestinian state, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sharpened his rhetoric, calling the recognition campaign an existential threat to Israel's very survival.
We will have to fight both at the UN and in all other arenas against the false propaganda directed at us and the calls to establish a Palestinian state, which would endanger our existence and constitute an absurd reward for terrorism. The international community will hear from us on this matter in the coming days.
For Israel, the recognition wave was both dangerous and deeply symbolic. Some of its closest Western allies, Britain, France, Canada, and Australia, had defied its wishes. For Palestinians, however, the move was hailed as historic. Palestinian Foreign Minister Wassim Aghabekian Shahin welcomed the momentum, describing recognition as irreversible.
We expect, hopefully, some 10 countries to recognize the State of Palestine. And this recognition is certainly not symbolic. It is a practical, tangible, irreversible step that countries must take if they are invested in preserving the two-state solution. This also sends a very clear message of hope to the Palestinian people who are facing an existential threat. Israel always claims that we are under an existential threat. Today, it is the Palestinians who are under this existential threat, and we need to raise our voices on this threat. So, recognizing our right to life and existence sends a clear message that war, bloodshed, settlement expansion, and annexation will not be tolerated, not by Palestinians, not by the world.
Shaheen pointed to Netanyahu's appearance at a West Bank settlement ceremony, calling it proof that Israel had no genuine intention to negotiate. In Washington, the contrast could not be sharper. President Donald Trump had recently hardened America's position, openly clashing with London over its decision.
We have to remember October 7th, one of the worst, most violent days in the history of the world, not just there, in the history of the world. And I got to see the tapes, and I wish I didn't see them, actually, but I got to see them. And I want an end. I want the hostages released, and I think it's going to be okay. But it has been a brutal period of time. But this has been going on for a long time. This is not something that's over the last year, 2 years, but this has been for decades and decades. But we want it to end. We have to have the hostages back immediately. That's what the people of Israel want. They want them back. And we want the fighting to stop. And it's going to stop. But a lot of bad things. You know, Hamas said that they're going to put the hostages up as bait. They're going to put the hostages in front of any attack. And that's pretty brutal. We haven't heard that one in a long time. So we have to remember that. So I have a disagreement with the Prime Minister on that score.
Yet, even as the White House held firm, the international consensus appeared to shift. A UN Commission of Inquiry accused Israel of committing genocide in Gaza, findings echoed by Amnesty International and even some Israeli rights groups. Israel rejected the allegations outright, but its diplomatic isolation deepened. So, what does recognition of Palestine actually mean? In many ways, Palestine is both a state and not a state. It fields embassies and Olympic teams and enjoys the backing of 3/4 of UN members. But it lacks agreed borders, a defined capital, and control over its territory. The West Bank remains occupied, Gaza besieged. Recognition carries more symbolism than practicality, but symbolism matters. Britain's Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy framed the decision in the context of history.
Hamas is not the Palestinian people. A Palestinian state is a just cause. And our country, 108 years ago, signed up to the Balfour Declaration. We believe in a homeland for the Jewish people, but we also stated that we believed in the civil and religious rights of the Palestinian people. And now is the time to stand up for that two-state. Otherwise, you're effectively saying you believe in no state for the Palestinian people.
With Britain and France joining China and Russia, 4 of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council now support Palestinian statehood. That leaves the United States isolated. Analysts argue recognition gives Palestinians diplomatic leverage, forcing negotiations on equal terms, state to state. In Brussels, EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas went further, calling for sanctions on Israeli settlers and tariffs on Israeli goods. Public opinion across Europe, transformed since 2023, increasingly views recognition not as tokenism, but as the first step toward meaningful action. For Palestinians, recognition offers dignity and legitimacy. For Israel, it represents a dangerous reward for terrorism. For Washington, it sets a precedent. And for Europe, it is a test of whether symbolism can evolve into substance. What is certain is that after decades of stalemate, the map of Middle Eastern diplomacy has shifted. Recognition today at the UN marks a turning point. Whether it paves the way for peace or deepens the fault lines of conflict will echo far beyond New York's assembly halls.